All right. How did you do with the exercise number 3 with the image interpretation? I hope that helped you understand lecture number 5 more and that you're really enjoying yourself and that you're really becoming more spatially aware. This lecture number 6 here is really a fun one where we're just going to consider and think about more spatial thinking in everyday life. Okay, so we do it. We've mentioned this already and given examples, but we want to kind of dig into this and spend a little time making sure we see that all of us are spatially thinking all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. So here's a cool study that was done back in 2003. So it's a little old now, but it's called the child car seat study, and it was actually published in a journal of pediatrics. And it was conducted because somewhere between 79 and 94% of child safety seats are installed improperly. Okay, I don't know about you, but you've probably seen these campaigns where you can go to the fire department and they'll put the car seat in your car for you because there's issues and you don't want the children, especially the young babies, to be in danger in a car seat that they think they're safe because they're in the car seat, but the car seat's not properly installed in the car. So what was found out in this study is that the instructions were written at a 10th grade level, but most, 2 out of 3 parents couldn't read above a 9th grade level. And there was a recommendation that the instructions be written more at a 5th grade level. But probably what's more interesting to us is that another issue was spatial literacy. Anybody who's tried to put anything together these days, most of the instructions actually don't have very many words on them at all. In this particular case, they had not just written instructions, but they had pictures and diagrams and words such as things we recognize from spatial thinking, up and down, front and back, those kinds of things. Also, the parts were had to be linked to the whole. There was alignment, there was orientation, there was bringing things together, and also there was motions like clockwise and pull. Okay, so obviously spatial literacy, was part of this. And so the key to putting the car seat together in the car correctly was to have this coordination among the written instructions, the pictures, the schematic diagrams, and the required actions. So really, really interesting because nobody wants to endanger their child by not being able to put the car seat in correctly, but having this coordination of all these components, not just the written word, but the pictures, the diagrams, the spatial language was critical to making sure things were done right. And so very, very obvious this need to incorporate spatial thinking into this process, which is certainly part of most people's everyday life. So here's some more examples. And again, this whole lecture is just on trying to make this real for us in everyday life. So I know you've thought of this already. I know we've mentioned it already, but pretty much everything that we do on a daily basis has to do with some kind of spatial thinking. We just don't think about it. We just don't appreciate it. Unless, of course, you're watching these videos right now. And then, of course, you've grown tremendously in your appreciation. And I'm glad about that. Okay. So many spatial thinking techniques, abilities, things that you do are fundamental and they're just taken for granted. Okay. But very, very important that lots and lots of successes, and hopefully we've mentioned a bunch of these already in the lectures, and some monumental failures can be attributed to either good spatial thinking or poor spatial thinking. Okay. So again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of spatial thinking, whether it's in our discipline or in our daily life. So again, let's think of some examples. So calling your daughter on a study abroad program in Europe, trying to figure out what time to call. Okay. Most of us these days, we just go to our phone and we ask the Android, or we ask Siri, and they tell us. We're losing our spatial thinking ability. Or packing our son to take him to college with very limited car space. Or getting to some college town and finding an apartment. You got to find your way around. Again, GPS maybe is solving our problem for us, and we're not using our spatial thinking abilities there. Putting together an exercise machine that was taken apart to move it, but you don't have the instructions anymore. Okay. Putting all the furniture in the bedroom without blocking all the electrical outlets, the heat, the windows, and the doors. That's no small challenge with all the stuff we often try to put in to our bedrooms these days. Or another one, a trip to a new supermarket where none of the aisles are familiar. Okay. That's challenging. It probably takes you 3 times longer to shop in a grocery store you've never been to before than one that you go to all the time, and you actually have those aisles spatially memorized. You don't think about that, but you do. Okay, so lots and lots and lots of examples here of spatial thinking in our daily lives. Okay, and as we've defined, spatial thinking involves space, right? The whole thing comes down to location or space. And so, what kind of space are we talking about? Well, we could be talking about global time space. We could talk about car trunk space. We could talk about neighborhood space, supermarket space, bedroom space, machine space. We haven't mentioned puzzles before, but puzzle space, garden space. How do I space my different vegetables that I'm planting in my garden, or my flowers? Shoelace space, dress pattern space. We could go on and on and on and on, but I'm trying to show you that all the time, day after day after day, we're using spatial thinking, right? Okay. And we understand that these tasks, all these things that we're trying to do every single day, represent these different methods, different graphic representations of things, different complex sequences of how we're going to put all that together. Definitely orientation and rotation, trying to get things into the trunk, twisting and tightening, breaking tasks into discrete parts. That's absolutely key, right? And some of these tasks, were taught formally to us, and others we've picked up informally over time, watching other people do it, maybe watching videos or other situations like that. Okay, so it's important to remember that all these different tasks can be formed in different ways, and there's no right way, no one right way to think spatially. Yet at the same time, hopefully you're growing in your awareness as that occurs. Okay. All right, just one last slide, and let's just think about that. We talked about in daily life, spatial thinking, but what about at work? Okay. Just getting to work requires spatial thinking, right? You kind of do that mindlessly at this point if you've been going for a long time, but still required spatial thinking. At work, knowing who to ask for help in different situations, that requires understanding the organizational chart, which is a spatial representation of who's who, at work. And then so many of our jobs require specific spatial skills. And then recognition that when we're doing something, we learn from what we're doing. Okay? When we see 2 sides of a penny, or we see an analog face of a watch that has numbers or has lines, we've got recognition. We just finished that exercise with the image interpretation, recognition, pattern recognition, size, shape, tone, texture, all these things together that our brain just immediately sees what's going on. Okay. And then, of course, the really big deal of 2D versus 3D, which we've talked through a bunch, understanding that if we start thinking spatially in 2 dimensions, it's a little simpler, and then we can grow up to the 3rd dimension. All right, one more lecture in this series, and we'll be done. But I hope you're still enjoying the things that you're learning and that you got a lot out of today, where we looked at real life and how much spatial thinking you're doing every day. And we just got the tip of the iceberg with that. So thanks and have a good day.